I'm really pleased to be joined by Doug McKelvey. Doug is part of the Rabbit Room community in Nashville, Tennessee. He's also the author of the book, Every Moment Holy. Every Moment Holy is a collection of prayers that are designed for different occasions. This book is a fixture in my family's home. Not only is it just beautifully written, but the illustrations and the production is quite beautiful as well. Doug, thanks so much for taking time to talk with me.
Thank you, Josh. Happy to be here.
I want to start with the idea of pre-written prayers. They could bring to mind cold, lifeless religion. Some might even feel that extemporaneous or spontaneous prayers are more authentic or more real. So curious, my first question is, what value do you see in pre-written prayers, and what benefit can they have for someone following Jesus?
That's a good question, and my own background is one where I would have been very suspicious of such things. I see the same value in pre-written prayers that I see in anything that is thoughtfully and prayerfully crafted. And most of us wouldn't say, "Oh, I hope my pastor doesn't prepare," because that would be, an ungodly thing to do, because then he wouldn't be listening to the Spirit. Um, we pretty well understand that the Spirit of God is working through someone's diligent efforts and preparation. Yes, there are moments when we spontaneously pour out our hearts to God, and but there are also those moments when we don't know what to say in the moment. Another facet of the answer to that question, I think, goes back to when Jesus was asked by his closest followers to teach them how to pray. And he gives them this beautifully crafted prayer that we call the Lord's Prayer, and that many denominations and churches and traditions still pray that on a regular basis, some every week. And we don't look at that and say, "Oh, Jesus gave this form prayer and we shouldn't pray it because it's not spontaneous." As we meditate on what's going on in that scenario, that a lot of our suspicions about the idea of a pre-written prayer kind of have to fall away. Those ideas get pretty challenged just by the fact that Jesus gave his disciples this specific prayer. If someone is not comfortable with a pre-written prayer, I don't feel any need to convince them that they need to change the way they're praying. What I hope is that by offering the prayers in this book, it becomes an invitation to someone who's come from a background like I did, where non-spontaneous prayer is suspect. The Celtic Christians in Ireland, they just had these beautiful little prayers for everything: for milking the cows, for covering the coals on the hearth at night, that they had this very immediate sense of God's presence with them at every moment and in every task. The Puritans as well. You can see in the book, The Valley of Vision, the kind of prayers that individuals were writing and then passing around to others in their faith communities.
There's one section in Every Moment Holy for practicing the presence of God. What does that even mean? Why is that
Sure.
important?
As you unpack the phrase, what it really means is practicing a mindfulness of the presence of God. Because God is present, whether we acknowledge him or not, whether we recognize that he's there or not. So it's really about this cultivation of a mindset that God is indeed in this moment, that he is with you, that he is sovereign over what's happened.
Can you take a few moments to talk about what you hope to communicate, both through the idea of the title, Every Moment Holy, as it relates to this idea of practicing God's presence?
For the follower of Jesus, there is no part of life that Christ is not the mediator. A day will come when every part of creation will be recognized as being consecrated, in the same way. That every part of creation, every creature, every person, everything in the universe is God's and is for his glory and his purposes. So a day will come when we will recognize that all things and all moments are God's, are set apart for him, for his glory, and for our delight in him. I hoped that every moment holy might help to lead people towards is this understanding that it's easy as we go through our daily lives to get sidetracked, to get overwhelmed by just the number of things we have to do and to take care of, but to encourage people to begin to pause throughout the day and recognize that these moments actually are consecrated. They're shot through with the light and the love of God. And that we would do well, that it is a good and helpful thing for our hearts to pause and to reorient ourselves to that eternal perspective.
The book is Every Moment Holy. There's a second volume coming out in February on death, grief, and hope. And one of the reasons I love this work is it seems to be a way of seeing one's everyday tasks, but through the eyes of eternity. Thank you so much for this time, Doug. Thank you so much for serving the church in this way. It has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for the invitation. I've enjoyed the conversation.